And that's exactly what I'm doing. First, I'm going to tell you the bad things about Joe. Now that's over. I'm going to tell you the good things about Joe. Now that's over. That doesn't take long. Good, that's some fun, isn't it? Oh, a long time ago, I don't know, well, he's over 40-some years ago. Joe started in the ministry, and when he gave his heart to the Lord in those days, and if you would ask him today, he would tell you this right here. It says,
"27 years ago, this month, I first came to this state. Only we were way down in what I call the brine pan of South Carolina. And my life has never been the same since. And probably because of Joe and Linda Edwards, because he's the one that was foolish enough to hire me. And I'm not sure what all happened there. I know I went through a fast 4 years, but I had the most fun on that job of any job I've had in my life, and probably made the least money. But it was all a fun ride. And I was so glad to be coming here today to this kind of thing because nobody's dead here. We have been going to so many funerals in the last month. I've been watching for a first reminder that this is a happy occasion, and I need to talk some about he wasn't there when I got there, and that's how we happened to meet Joe and Vicki Hayes. He was standing in for it there, nothing to lie. And that was a good experience. And had it not been for Joe and Linda Edwards, we would have never come to know our good friends Joe and Vicki Hayes. And I guess I listened to Handy and Combs quite a bit. And Handy is always saying something about getting hanitized or hanitizing someone. I guess when I came to South Carolina, I got Southernized. And I learned about chicken bob and South Carolina mustard-based barbecue. And so I don't like the other kind, but the Yankee kind. And I'm still in the South, and being a Southerner, I don't like anything like those Yankees have. Snow up to here, shoveling through the walkway to find your car. And so I got down here and stayed, and I began to talk like some of the talk about some of them. I still can't do it the way they do. But in some crowds, when I go north, they say, like they do down here, that they do not know how y'all really talk. The things that I remember seriously about Joe Edwards was his vision. And that's why we're here today. Yeah. In this beautiful place. And one of the things that came to my mind this morning, or this afternoon, whatever it is, I remember the first week I was with Florence Wesley. And we walked up in that sad little chapel, and we knelt there and prayed. And I think Joe Hayes was there with us. Joe Hayes and me and the pastor knelt at that altar. And I wish I had those moments to live again with these 63 years of experience that I have now. The time at Florence would have been different for me. But it took God so long because of my stubbornness to change me into what I needed to be. And I still ain't there yet. But he is still working on it. And so I want to tell you, my days at Florence were an education. And as we've already heard, I never heard Joe Edwards get angry with anyone. And we had some foxhole experiences. So we became foxhole buddies. And we could fight off the darting bullets after a fashion. Now, he handled it better than I did. I was pretty fiery at times. I could think of ways to get him back. But we survived all that, and I looked back and I thought, oh, dear Lord, I'd like to crawl in a hole when I think of how I handled these situations. But I have become better at it now. I'm getting to where I need to be. And so he's still working on me. Joe Edwards is a person in my life that became my family. My family's all dying off, so I'm glad to have some of these people down here like this. And having said that, it's like he's always the same. And so I always kept in touch with him. He kept bothering me when he thought he was rid of me. I was over there. And we had him to come over there to the Nasty Greens Church and try to tell us how to do it on a weekend. And he did a very good job of that. And so we've been over here a few times, but not too much here recently because I've been busy trying to figure out how to retire. That's about all I want to say, but I really have enjoyed knowing the Edwards. Linda has been his right arm in lots of ways, and he always accepted that and saw how without her he couldn't do it. So I've enjoyed knowing the whole family. Now my wife will tell you what really happened.
I'd like for everybody to stand up. It was good for me to not stand. It's been sitting a while. Just take a couple of deep breaths and ready? You can be seated. Well, I read a memo last night before we left, and I read where we were supposed to bring some photos, and I completely forgot that. So I have just 3 snapshots that's in my memory that I want to share with you today. First snapshot that I remember Jill and Linda was when we descended on their family and their home in a big truck. We had everything we owned in a big truck, and there were 5 of them and 5 of us, and we all lived in one little house together. Well, I don't know how many weeks. I'm sure it seemed like an eternity to them. We ate lots of chicken, and what I didn't know. And it was all very good. I was impressed with what Linda could do, and I really did something dumb. We would go to the grocery, I didn't know what to get to help her out, so we buy more chicken. Chicken every way we had it, and it was all good. Let's see. A few months later, second snapshot. Oh, by the way, that first one, I remember Krista and Renee. Well, Renee was the same age as our youngest child. They were both 5. And her daddy said she was the mouth of the South. But anyway, Joey was the teenager, so he was, everybody looked up to him, the kids did anyway. And he was learning how to play the piano. He was playing You Light Up My Life. That's the first snapshot I remember getting this piano. The second one is a more personal one. After we'd been there a couple of months, I didn't know what was wrong with me, but I knew I would just never smile again. And not that people were unfriendly to me. We moved into a very loving family and church family, and very accepting and helpful. But inside there was something wrong, and I just felt like I just look out the window and I think I'm not going to smile again. I just feel sad inside. And I don't know who told him, or he just picked up on it, but one afternoon he came in my classroom and he said something, I don't remember the exact words, but he knew how I was feeling, that I wanted to go home. And it had been, I guess that's the first big move. I'd never been away from home, and I never really experienced homesickness, and that's what I was having, was homesickness. But anyway, and he talked to me and said, that they really needed me there. I have the details. Well, I did, but anyway, that helped. And then the third snapshot I wanted to share with you. Our year, we had planned to go there and just stay 1 year. Well, Jim could not get off from General Motors, where he worked in Indiana, for a whole school year. So they said, well, you can take 6 months, but that'll be a personal leave, and you have to come back to work. And so at the end of 6 months, he was undecided. He really wanted to stay down there, but for the sake of our boys, he thought maybe he shouldn't throw away all that security. So he went back up to Indiana, and I stayed down there with 2 of our sons and finished out the school term. Well, it was in May, and school was about out. And I was really looking forward to going back home. And again, he makes another trip, he comes over to see me. And, but he said, he had heard, the night before, we were at some friend's house, and we were praying. There had been some I know you never have this where you go, but there'd be a little bit of turmoil in our church. Of course, the pastor is always, in the middle of it generally. But anyway, so I was at some of the friends' house, and we were having a little prayer meeting. And during that little prayer meeting, the phone rings. This is for me. Well, it's Jim calling and asking me. He said, "Are you sure you want to come back home?" And I said, "Well, yes, I thought I did. Why are you asking?" And he said, "Well, he'd just been giving a lot of thought that he liked what he was doing in Florence. He felt like that's what he liked, helping other people. And if I was willing to live on what we were making there, he would just much prefer to go back to Florence." And I thought, wow. And my heart was still going home. But the next day, somehow, his antennas were up, I guess, and he heard about that phone call. And he came to me and he said, "I heard that Jim may come back, that you got a phone call." And I said, "Yes." And then he said, "Well, I have been praying about the church situation. And I asked God," he said, "I put out a police, and I asked God to do 3 things if I was to stay." And he said one of them was to send Jim Paschal back. And that was quite a turnaround. And from that moment on, I knew we were where we were supposed to be. I didn't feel that way before. I thought it was just some whim that I was wanting to do. But from that moment on, I knew God had us where we were supposed to be. But I want to say that Linda and Joe and Joe and Vicki Hayes were also foxhole buddies down at Florence when the enemy was shooting all around us. We learned to get real close. But anyway, to have friends like Joe and Linda who accept you as you are. He does have a vision. He is a man who not only talks it, but he walks it. Whatever he says, he does. He believes in what he is saying. And it's to have friends like that, to be interested in you, and to know no matter what you do, how your children mess up, he still loves you. He still loves them. He still is interested in them. And he truly is a man of God who wants to see everyone come to know the Lord. And we feel honored to have him. So,
Pastor Joe, it's a pleasure to be here with you, Linda, as always. And my wife sends her apologies. She's recovering from pneumonia, or she would be here. And you could probably tell I've been through a pretty good bout of bronchitis myself. Mine, unfortunately, didn't turn as bad as hers, but with the Lord's help, we're going to try to get through a couple of songs today that I hope will touch your heart. But I just wanted to say briefly that I first met Pastor Joe as a layman in the private sector before I came to know him as a pastor. It just so happened that he had a trailer with some furniture for sale out here in the front yard one day, and I was busy buying a building in downtown Gastonia, needed some office furniture, and sure enough, there was some at a great price. And I'm pleased to say to you that I got to know Pastor Joe privately, and he's an honorable Christian man in his private dealings, just as he is in his dealings here in the Lord's house. And it's sometimes people are different. You see them in church in one way, you see them outside of church or another. That's not the case with Pastor Joe. He's Pastor Joe. And he's testifying when he's out. He and I had the opportunity one time to have someone approach us. It was a beggar. And wanted some money. And Pastor Joe has got a pretty good nose. And he smells some spirits on the gentleman. And he said, "Son, I'm not going to give you anything for you to go buy any more spirits." So he's out there working for the Lord every day, trying to help people, and hopefully there's nothing for that gentleman. Pastor Joe, one of my favorite songs has always been Beulah Land, and I know it's one that you enjoy, and I hope that the Lord will give me the strength and the voice today without cracking to do it for you. In chapter 62 is the only place you will see in the Bible Beulah Land mentioned. It talks about the land of Beulah, which is really the New Jerusalem. And And the message is that God will never forsake you. You stick with Him, and He will always stick with you.
I'm kind of homesick for the tree to which I've never been before. No sad goodbye will there be spoken, for time won't matter anymore. You love I long for you, and someday on thee I'll stand. There my home shall be eternal. I'm looking now across the river where my faith is gonna end inside. Oh, there's just a of your days to live. Then I will take my heavenly flight. You are the land I long for you, and someday on thee I'll stand. There my home shall be eternal.
I can remember at Liberty Wesleyan, we didn't know, I sat in the back sometimes and came in. Down in Florence, I worked with him, and you in the Golden Grove. So I'm going to tell you about the real
Yeah.
I was asked maybe to make some funny comments or something, and I thought about it, and I thought of a few funny things, but they're probably not appropriate for church. So I'm just going to tell you, I call this the essence of Joe Edwards. As has been said, Joe Edwards is a man with vision. A lot of vision. In fact, his vision just never stopped. I mean, when he got to one part of it, there was more and more and more. He was a man of vision, and he always knew what he wanted the church to be and tried to take it to that level. Another thing about him, he's a man of courage because he acted on his vision. A lot of people dream, but he put feet to his dreams. And he would actually put himself on the line and get out there and try to do what he had envisioned. He also had an adventuresome spirit. I mean, he would go where there was no one else and start something no one else would really bother with. I think this work right here is a testimony to that. He always told me he wanted to go and build where no man had built before. Like Paul. That was his vision. That was part of his dream. Another thing about Joe Edwards is he had a heart for the lost. Everything he did was designed to bring the lost to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. All of his vision encompassed trying to win others to Christ. And one thing that really impressed me about Joe Edwards was that he would reach out to the fallen. I can think of people, it doesn't matter how far they went in sin, it didn't matter if they were Christians that had fallen, pastors that had fallen. I can think of two people in particular where he went out and one of them had strayed away from the Lord and is right now living not far from me and preaching the gospel. Because Joe Edwards sought him out. And another that had fallen in his ministry and people had pretty well turned away from him. And Joe Edwards ministered to him. And he had a fruitful ministry after that. I appreciate you. We had some good times. We had some hard times. We all grew up a lot. But I've always appreciated you. Thank you.
When I was asked to come here and speak, I just had so many memories come through. And unfortunately, one of the first things Pastor Joe taught me was that you can't talk about rulers. And so many of those yard sale stories I didn't actually see. So we'll just have to leave them to the side. But it's coming with the facts. And the facts is that back in the middle 80s, there was a young couple with two little kids that was unchurched and didn't know the Bible. And there was a couple there that took the time and the love and brought us into the church. And for that, we're all grateful. Being a young Christian I was, you always, I guess, being stubborn young Christian that I was, you always look for, things to hold on to, truth, miracles, just anything just to get supported. And I did have one story come to mind. And Pastor come and pick me up. Pastor has always had the net, or the art of coming up with these one-line phrases did so much time with me, which was needed. I had to make sure I wasn't getting into trouble. And so he'd come over one night with this famous car that I feel should be in the Smithsonian. It was a Plymouth. And I don't even know if he knows how many miles it was. But we went out visiting one night, and we visited everybody. It seems like. When we pulled back into my driveway, it was way after dark, it was late. And being semi-mechanically inclined, I noticed the valve all through the trip kept getting louder and louder. And we were sitting there, and he was just letting his car out. And we were talking, and the valves kept getting louder and louder. Finally, I just leaned over at him and I said, Pastor Joe, you notice the noise of your engine? And the kid, the great-minded man he is, he quickly cut the engine off. And he said, Reckon, should I check the oil? So we did, and we opened the hood and pulled out the dipstick. And since there was no evidence of any oil, once again, me being the mechanical man that I am, I looked over at him and I said, what brand of oil and what weight of oil do you use? And he looked over at me and he said, does it really matter? So during all the oil I had in the building, we did finally see something on the dipstick. He said, Bill, I better be getting it on home. Which was needed because at the time I was pretty much convinced that it was a miracle that car drove it. I had strengthened my walk with the Lord. But I guess once again, the only thing that I can say for sure, with all the years I've known this man, the hardest thing for a man to do, I think, is to make good decisions and then stick by. And I think that without a doubt, I can honestly say that Pastor Joe, with the heart of a pastor, and patience of the saint, has spent and made every decision that I can say based on his relationship with the Lord. And there's so many memories and examples that I will carry to my grave from him that I cannot say. Thank you.
I want you to notice when I pick my friends, they got hair, they're not my friends.
I want you to know that when I met Joe 24 years ago, I had a full head of hair. Well, I am going to tell you about the real Joe Edwards. Jim Pascal said that he was glad that he wasn't coming to the funeral. I thought it was a funeral. Need to know this, that when Joe showed up in Wisconsin, I teased him unmercifully about his hair and the lack thereof. So, divine justice, if you will. I moved to South Carolina in February of 1984. It was 3 months before Sherry and I were married. And so I learned a lot about family dynamic from Brother Joe. I was around the house a lot, and I kind of watched his family and saw some very interesting things. I'll never forget one day, I came into the kitchen, and Joey was there, and I was really there to see Joey, and we were talking, and while we're talking, I noticed Joe is peeling an onion. You know, he cuts the top off, and he peels it, and when he gets it peeled, gets the skin off, he just grabs it just like he would an apple. He just takes a big bite out of it. I've never seen anything like this in my life. And I look at Joey, and Joey just looked at me and said, "My dad's weird." I tell you, one of my favorite family dynamics stories. When I moved to South Carolina, Joe had 2 cars. He had a Chevette and he had an Aspen station wagon. And someone came along and offered him a great price for that Aspen station wagon. You got to know this, if the price is right, he'll sell anything. And so he sells the Aspen station wagon, so now he's down to 1 vehicle. At the time, Linda's working at Carolina Investors in Easley. And so she's at work. Now they're down to 1 car, just the Chevette. So Joe's got to come pick Linda up from work. She doesn't have her own car now. And he shows up at her work and he goes inside. And she wants to know why he's in there. He said, well, honey, because so-and-so dropped me off. Why did they drop you off? Well, because I sold the Chevette. Do you think Barbara can give us a ride home? And she said, you're kidding me. And Joe said, no, I sold the Chevette. She said, well, honey, let's go outside. And Joe said, I'm not going outside. She made a second plea. Honey, let's just go outside. And he started laughing. He said, I am not going outside. I learned a lot about, when it gets hot behind the pulpit. One day we're in the church. It's just Joe and I don't know what possessed me, but I opened the pulpit door to see what's inside the pulpit. It's incredible what was inside that pulpit, but one of the things that was there was a pack of cigarettes. And I pull it out, and I'm just amazed. I looked at Joe, I said, what is this doing in here? He said, well, Tony, you got to understand, sometimes he gets a little nervous back here, and you need something just to calm your nerves right in the middle of the sermon. One more precious family memory. Joe was having a yard sale one day, and if it wasn't nailed down, he'd put it in the yard sale. One of his favorite kind of yard sales. His wife wasn't there. So he's having a good day. Things are selling, and he sells these tables, or it's either a table or coffee tables, I don't remember for sure. And the person paid the money and was coming back later to pick it up. And the timing was absolutely beautiful because these people came, they loaded it, and they're in the house talking, and they're coming out of the house. Linda drives up, and she wants to know who they are and why the tables are in the back of the truck. And they said, we just bought them. And she said, you hold on. And she goes into the house, and Joe came out and unloaded the tables and gave her the money back. Everything you don't want to do in your family, I learned from Joe. Yeah, hey brother. I didn't know if this was a roast or we were honoring you, so I'm going to do both. Let me be more serious now. You and I live in a world where the value of men and women can be calculated any number of ways. One of the great benchmarks we use in our culture is that of money. Other things, we look at material goods, homes, vehicles that people accumulate, and we influence in the lives of so many. Joshua chapter 24 is one of my favorite chapters in all the Old Testament, and it concerns one of the great leaders, one of my favorite leaders of the Old Testament, that's Joshua. Joshua just had an unswerving dedication to the Lord, and he wasn't going to be moved. And he had something that even Moses didn't have, and just a resolve to get the work of God done. As that chapter is closing, it is closing by talking about Joshua's death, and there is paid to him a high compliment, a compliment that is so great that you have to take notice of it and plunge the depths of it. It says this in Joshua 24:31. And Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders. It says this, that Joshua laid a strong foundation, so much so that not only did his generation follow the Lord, but he left such a legacy that the next generation followed the Lord as well. He laid a firm foundation. And that has been the legacy that Joe has left for us. His foundation is firm. And all along his life and ministry, the lives are testimonies of his influence for the Lord. 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 1, the Apostle Paul talks to the people there, and he said, what is it? Do you need letters of recommendation from us? I tell you, we have letters of recommendation, not letters written by hand, but he looks at those believers there at Corinth and said, you are our letters of recommendation. So Joe, I want to say to you that we are your letters of recommendation, and your vision and your passion are carried on every Sunday in churches that you don't attend anymore. This past Sunday we had a great Sunday morning service. There were a lot of spontaneous testimonies. One of those testimonies was Brother Tony Reyes. It was a 5-minute testimony talking about the influence of Joe Edwards on his life. And if it hadn't been for Joe Edwards in his life, that he wouldn't be there last Sunday morning giving his testimony. All of us are benefactors of those that have gone on before. In my life, there are 8 people so far. I'm 41 years old. 8 people in my life that I say I stand on the shoulders of. Well, you're number 3. First was my father, second Jim Harrison, and third Joe Edwards. Joe Edwards spent 1 year in Wisconsin, and as far as I'm concerned, for no other reason than to influence my life. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm in South Carolina. It's just that simple. That's how I got here, through Joe Edwards. And there are people today who continue to influence the kingdom of God because they were influenced by the kingdom of God through the ministry of Joe Edwards. So Joe, we laugh with you, we cry with you, we celebrate this time in your life, and say this, that the measure of your influence goes far beyond anything that this world can give us as a proper gauge. Your influence lives on now in churches around the United States and will continue to live on, way past your generation and the generation after you. We love you, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
I'd like to say, I know Pastor Edwards and Sister Linda, and he is a man of God, a man of passion, a man of humility, a man of prayer. And he brings the best out of me. That's hard to say for a lot of people. But his spirit and his love, his compassion, and the power of the Spirit of the Lord is upon him. Every time I meet him, I just sense the very presence of God Almighty. And it strengthens my heart. And it encourages me as a young Christian. And I know Sister Linda, Pastor Edwards is retiring, and everybody says, well, he's semi-retired. You're his right hand. And I want you to know this song, because you're a woman that stood by your husband and through the tough and the good times. And a woman of prayer, a woman that loves the Lord. And your children who aren't children anymore. They're grown up, they've got children of their own. And all the blessings that they've been to. I want to dedicate this song to you. It's when Mama prayed. Heaven, pay attention. But because of God's people praying, men and women today in this congregation, but by the prayers of God's people, that God, through the Holy Spirit, answered those prayers. And we've experienced the peace and the forgiveness of Jesus Christ. And I want to tell you, Linda's a lady of prayer. And she's lifted up her children, and she's lifted up God's people. While they were sick, while they were spiritually sick, children that were injured, lifting up her husband to pray. Well, and I remember, Brother Joe, when you would preach over at Lincolnton, I'd look over there sometimes, and Linda would be praying. Sitting on the left front, on the right side. She'd have her eyes closed. I know she wasn't sleeping. Because the power of God was moving. And she was over there praying, and God would move, and Pastor Joe would preach. God will just have His wonderful way. Souls will get saved, people will win the victory. And it's through prayer. And this song is dedicated to you, Sister.
Spread their wings and stood replaced.
I was trying to find a song to sing that would fit the occasion. And so I went out and bought a tape, and I looked over the words, and so it's not quite what I want to say. So I went to my pastor who writes music, and I said, could you use this music and write different words for me? He said, Renee, he said, just let me write you a song. And so I told him a little bit about what I wanted to say, and he wrote this song for my dad. It's called God's Plan. Life can be so hard, and time can leave us battered and scarred, but through the fire and the rain, in His mighty power, you overcame. When I needed a light, when I was burdened by the struggles of life, I prayed that God would save me. And so He sent you to help me to see. So thank you for being God's man. You've been so faithful to His marvelous plan. Through all the years, the joy and the tears, trusting in Jesus, He never gave in to fear. God used you to make me who I am. So thank you for being God's man. When you climb a mountain, you're straining toward the peak. But it's after you reach the summit and the journey that you talk about, and the Lord you couldn't have made it without. So thank you for being God's man. You've been so faithful to His marvelous plan. Through all the years, the joy and the tears, trusting in Jesus, He never gave in to fear. God used you, Dad, to make me who I am. So thank you. I thank God for you. I thank you for being God's man. That's what you've been, not only in the lives of your children, but in all the lives here, and the lives of people we don't even see.
Yes.
And you're going to continue to be God's man.
Have fun. Lay in the snow.
We've been there for 5 years. Yeah, long, good enough time. Tony Reyes. Yes. It's Rachel Galloway. I got two names. This is for Scott.
Hey Scott, I love you. Hey.
Everybody's been asking where you are. So I said, I'm telling them everybody's asked where he's been. This is for Scott since he didn't get to be here.
You're a bum for not being here.
Yeah, you missed a good day.
Yes, you did.
And your wife did a wonderful job singing.
Oh. There's their youngest one.
Hand me down. I don't know where. I don't know where.
He'll zoom in of you.
I have no idea.
She turned around.
There's Ethan, all grown up. Those people.
Daddy, get here.
Whenever we
It did. Free taking the baby around, showing everybody. There's the new pastor. Right there. I think that's his son.
They say he has Michael's when he was little.
His holy blood.